Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. In the last video we talked about Singed, who was first place on the poll, and the runner-up for that will be Kindred, the Eternal Hunters. Recently I've been getting a lot of feedback in my videos saying the intro was a bit too long, so I'll try my best to cut it short, but the reason why I feel the need to say the disclaimer is because there are still people out there who believe I'm somehow insulting them by calling them a nobody because of the title. But regardless, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, the Why No One Plays series is not meant to be taken literally. Obviously, there are people who still play that champion either because they really like them or because they played them back when they were popular and now they aren't. The goal behind the series is to give a little exposure to champions who in the recent years haven't been picked very frequently by discussing possible reasons that make them not as appealing to pick relative to their peers. To reiterate, this is not a champion hate video, nor am I making fun of the people playing them, so now that I've established that this isn't a personal attack, let's continue on with why no one plays Kindred. Jungle has been a very colorful role. I've covered a lot of junglers in the past, all of them being very unique from one to another, sometimes to a fault. But Shyvana, Udyr, and Skarner all have something in common. They're beefy, they move really fast, and they're pretty annoying to deal with. But Kindred, on the other hand, is a rare case. As of right now, they exist as the only viable marksman jungler in all of League of Legends. By the way, I don't really consider Graves to be a marksman because he doesn't have the standard 500 to 550 attack range, and he plays more like Lee Sin and Kayn, more like a fighter than he does an AD carry. The main reason why ranged auto attackers aren't too prevalent in the jungle is because of two factors. Many of them are squishy and slow, so they take more damage, have slower clear speeds, and generally have poor tempo around the map. And number two, most AD carries lack a meaningful gap closer or crowd control, which are things you need to have as a jungler. There have been some cheese strategies in the past, such as Twitch jungle, Ezreal jungle, but they've been phased out over time and are now extremely fringe playstyles that aren't really too much of a thing anymore. Kindred is a marksman specifically designed for the jungle. Their gameplay encompasses targeted assassination by hunting down jungle camps with the mark on them, or whatever champion they label the next target. And they circumvent the two main weaknesses of ADCs in the jungle quite well, being able to effectively kite jungle camps and gank most lanes without too much difficulty, although some extra follow-up may be necessary. The main draw of Kindred is their rapid snowball potential. Every time they pick up a mark, Lamb gains bonus attack range on her passive and attack speed on her Q, while Wolf deals more on-hit damage with his W and more execute damage on his E. Simply put, they embody the feast or famine playstyle. A Kindred with 10 stacks by 20 minutes can be massively stronger than most champions, and provided they have a tank or support to back them up, you can actually 1v9 with this champion. The risk or reward normally counts as a positive. It separates the good players from the bad and usually leads to some flashy Twitch clips. That's why we see champions like Kai'Sa, Vayne, Yone, Yasuo, Zed, Kha'Zix, Katarina, so on and so forth. People love a high skill ceiling because it means the more time you put on that champion, the more return on investment you get. Theoretically, of course. Why that's bad for Kindred is because they play the one role in the game that is not self-sufficient. All marksman champions are inherently dependent on team composition, no matter how much an ADC main tries to say otherwise. Some do take care of themselves better than others like Lucian, that's why you see him played mid and in rare cases top lane, but even Lucian himself is dependent on some element of team support. Kindred has everything they need to clear camps effectively, gank somewhat effectively, and path around the jungle effectively, but they are still an AD carry, and that comes with all the weaknesses of one. Said weaknesses are usually alleviated with the help of your support in the bot lane, someone who can either engage on or protect you from enemy targets. In the jungle, you have no such luxury. For the most part, if you come in contact with the enemy jungler, it's them versus you for at least 5 to 8 seconds before your laners rotate to help you out. Usually junglers pillar an important role for the team. Tank junglers like Zac and Nunu can serve as primary or secondary engage and can work with either the support or top lane to start fights. Mage junglers like Talia and Fiddlesticks can provide huge area control and so much damage that they essentially count as a second mid laner. Assassins like Kha'Zix, Rengar, and Elise can dispatch high priority targets in the blink of an eye, or alternatively they can provide token utilities such as crowd control and slows if they're not doing so well, so they can cover multiple roles. Fighter junglers like Hecarim, Rek'Sai, and Olaf are overall very strong and can dish out good damage while soaking equal amount of punishment, even without many items. Kindred has only one role, to deal damage. Mind you, they do some pretty ridiculous damage, but that's all they can do. Such is the job of an AD carry and why they're so reliant on their team to cover the other bases. However, the jungler is meant to be that Swiss Army knife who can fill in a lot of shoes that can't easily be filled elsewhere. By selecting Kindred, you forfeit the chance to fill in many of those vital components with the hopes that your superior DPS later on can win you the game. As Kindred, you lack the area control of a mage jungler, engage and crowd control of a tank jungler, the burst damage and flank potential of an assassin jungler, and the brawling capability of a fighter jungler. If you first pick Kindred, you essentially have to hope that your teammates pick champions that fill as many of these roles as possible, not necessarily because the team needs it to win the game, but because you will need it just as much as your AD carry does. If you compound that with their passive, Mark of the Kindred, which requires them to snowball in order to be effective, you have an extremely touch-and-go jungler who can machine gun the enemy team or be a second inting bot lane. Kindred may arguably be the most difficult jungler in the game to play. Again, you might be asking why that's a detriment because other super difficult champions like Yasuo and Lee Sin have cult followings. The answer to that is because they're a champion who needs to snowball to perform well in the mid to late game, but they're quite vulnerable without items, which makes things even harder. In the early game, Kindred lacks the necessary attack speed, attack damage, crit chance, cooldowns, so on and so forth to prove a veritable threat, especially without marks, meaning you have to be super careful in order to survive until then. And there are a lot of threats you have to contend with who won't just sit there and wait for you to stack up, like Elise, Kha'Zix, Rengar, Rek'Sai, Evelynn, Lee Sin, all champions who can bring the hurt early on. That's not to say going up against those champions results in an instant loss, but the onus falls on you to play way better because you have to not only help your team out with ganks and counter ganks, but you also have to learn how to kite camps to not take too much damage, you have to watch the enemy jungler like a hawk, you have to mark the right targets at the right time to get stacks on your passive, you have to watch where the marks are on jungle camps so you can snag them, which also means you have to be immaculate with map awareness to make sure you're not being collapsed on by the enemy team. And after you add all that, you are playing an AD carry, so your mechanics better be crisp. There are so many things you have to master to even play Kindred at a competent level. Problem is, most of those things are negative motivators, not positive ones. To elaborate on what I mean by that, positive motivation is the same as motivation by reward. That is, let's say your mother wants you to clean the dishes. If you do the dishes, she will give you some candy. So if you decide to clean the dishes, you get a nice treat, but you can also choose not to and nothing will happen from it. You won't lose anything. On the other hand, let's say if you don't clean the dishes, you'll get grounded. So you end up doing the dishes to avoid a negative outcome. That is how most of Kindred's stipulations are. You have to jump through those hoops not to make you stronger than your opponent, but to make you less weak than them, if that makes sense. Putting it simply, in most circumstances, you'll have to put in way more work to get the same result on Kindred that you would have to on any other champion. The payoff for going above and beyond is there, but the average player doesn't feel like it's worth it to put in all of that effort. Speaking of effort, there aren't many champions in the game with an innate scaling mechanic, and those that do can usually function without it, or without having to overinvest in it like Rengar and Veigar, since they still have plenty of value to the team without them. The bonus stats from Bone Tooth Necklace and Primordial Evil are mostly just icing on the cake. Moreover, they're way easier to get. Rengar just has to kill one of every target, and Veigar just needs to CS and hit champions. Kindred's scaling mechanic affects their passive, Q, W, and E all to a pretty important degree. In fact, so much of their power scaling into the mid and late game is contingent on whether or not they can get a good number of stacks because that governs their attack speed, on-hit damage, execute damage, and attack range. Here's the thing. They have to deliberately select an enemy champion to place the mark on and successfully kill them. It's not like Rengar where they're all active at the same time. That can be difficult to accomplish because it puts them on alert that you're going to be targeting them if you use your mark on them, so they can play perfectly safe until then. Yes, it is possible to use your passive mark as a tool of deception by targeting the top lane and then going after the bot lane. But overall, it is one of the more inconsistent passives in the game, where some games you could get lucky and get 10 stacks by 20 minutes, while others you will only have 3. Because of how much gold value and combat potential you get out of Mark of the Kindred, Riot intentionally weakened their base numbers and stats because of how ridiculously overpowered they would be. But they made it so that Kindred was so dependent on their marks to perform well, which means you're starting the game already at a disadvantage in terms of strength with one of the most unforgiving snowball passives in the game as a marksman in the jungle. At the moment, their biggest issue, to me anyway, is that of their balance. Too much of their potential power is gated behind whether you can have a strong start in the early game to 1v9 in the late game. But the obstacles they put on you are almost suffocating to the point where you basically play the game on hard mode while everyone else is on normal difficulty. It could take the average player hundreds of games just to get an idea for who to mark, how to sneak into the enemy jungle to take their camps, etc. And that's only half of the equation. The other half is being able to just play jungle itself. No two junglers play the exact same way, so you'll have to go through the individual nuances of Kindred's pathing, ganking, skirmishing, what have you. On top of that, there's a third half. I know that makes no sense, just bear with me. Even if you get through all that, you still have to keep an eye out for the enemy team comp and your own. I know every jungler has a few counters, but blind picking Kindred can lead to several games where you essentially lose during champ select. Now, unlike most champions in this series who just straight up need full reworks, Kindred is fine design-wise. The only thing they need is some tweaking to make them feel less unforgiving to play. Overall, the kit isn't bad, decent mobility, they are ranged so they can kite melee as well, an amazing ultimate that can make or break teamfights, but they're just way too dependent on a lot of factors specifically because they're really weak without stacks on their passive. I think if they shifted the balance of power from the stack bonus to their base stats, that would probably make things a lot less conditional. For example, let's look at their Q Dance of Arrows. Every time you use it, you get 25% bonus attack speed plus 5% for each stack. You could raise this up to 35% and lower the bonus attack speed per stack to 4%. You'll still get the same end result of 75% bonus attack speed at 10 stacks, but the punishment for having a rough start early game won't make you as irrelevant as you are now. Same thing with Wolf's Frenzy and Mounting Dread. I would change the current health damage from maybe 1.5% at base to 3.5. Then the increase from every stack would only tack on 0.5% instead of a full one. I am anticipating some Kindred mains to argue that that will make them easier to play and lower the skill ceiling, but the main reason why I believe Kindred to be not too popular is that the skill floor, not the skill ceiling, is way too high for how little the actual benefit is. It's the same thing they did for Kayle essentially, where they made her become ranged at level 6 versus 11 so she wasn't completely useless early on, but in return they made her less 1v9 in the late game since it's now easier for her to reach that point. What are your thoughts? Do you like Kindred as they are now, or do you think they can use a bit of tweaking to feel better to play? I don't think my suggestion on how to fix them is too bad of an idea, but there definitely needs to be some form of adjustment. Let me know what you think can be done with Kindred to make them more desirable choice in the comments down below, or again, alternatively, if you think they're fine as is and shouldn't be touched, I would like to hear why you think that as well. But thanks to everyone who watched all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated, and if you would like to support my channel, best way you can do so is leave a comment, share this video with your friends, and subscribe. Once again, I do have a playlist in the description below as well as links to my Discord, Patreon, and Twitch if you want to watch some more content and follow me on other platforms. But for now, that's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for the next video. Take care.